Now, so we on this worksheet we have the inputs and outputs, and then in the second one we have the amortization table. So I want to add something to this one, to the table, and let's do the following. Right click on letter F and then insert. So now you have a new column between E and G. Okay. And I do things like this so you can learn how to insert. You can also delete, copy. And this one is going to be called cumulative interest. So you can see, as every payment you make, how much interest you are accumulating, how much money you have paid in total. And so that will be equal to what? In payment number 1, it will be simply that payment equals E2. But the following one will be equal to what? How do you find the cumulative interest of the two payments? So it would be the cumulative plus the new interest payment. Okay. And then it's going to be the same all the way to the bottom, so you can double click. And so that table, that column will tell you how much principal you have, how much interest. And it's an eye-opener when you have a house. Look, we have this in monthly payments. So after 12 payments, how much interest have you paid on the loan? Now, almost $20,000. And all of that just went to the bank. It didn't go to reduce any principal. So let's do the same thing here. Let's right-click on H, insert a column, and let's call this one cumulative principal. And we can do the same calculation as in the other column. So it will be for payment number 1 is equal to the same, and then for the next ones it will be the cumulative plus the new principal payment. You can see that after 1 year of making payments, $20,000 of the total payment is for the bank to pay interest, and about $9,000 was applied to principal. And the reason why mortgage loans work that way is because in the beginning you have a huge outstanding balance, so you're paying a lot of interest. And then with every payment, what happens to that principal? It's being reduced. So if you go to the bottom of the table, and you know what? Let's remove the extra payment so we don't have those negative numbers. So let's go to sheet 1 and make the extra payment 0. So we have a regular loan. And then go back to the table. You can see that when you give your last payment, because your balance is very small, you're almost done, just one more payment, how much money is applied to interest in that payment? Only $9. And how much to principal? $21.38. And then you can see the totals. When you finish paying off the loan, principal $400,000 and total interest $373,000. If you combine both, it will be your total payment, which will be $7,373. Then at the end of the class, I can help you. All right. So when you do this, it's an eye-opener. You can see how expensive these loans are. And then, if you have student loans, you can use this for calculating your amortization table. All right. Now, let's go back to sheet number 1. Also, in the output section, we'll do the following. I'm going to show you a few more commands for loans specifically. What are they? So for this, let's call this section total interest / principal between payments. So if you want to find out how much money is principal and interest between payment 1 and 20 or 20 and 40, okay? So let's do the whole loan for now, between 1 and 360. Okay? So this one will be, let's do interest and then here principal. So for this one, the function is equal to, and we used this one before last class, it's CUM, cumulative, interest, I, PMT. And then try to do this on your own. Just follow the syntax that it's asking you for, rate, NPER. So don't look at what I input, just do it on your own. Just follow that syntax. If you don't do that, you're never going to learn how to use Excel. You have to do this on your own. You start clicking here, clicking there, try, and then you can find the mistakes you're making. And there's several ways in which you can do this. And you're supposed to get that number right there. We're doing this between payment 1 and payment 360. So you're supposed to get the same thing we got here. That one, it will be, I click on this one, actual number of payments. And I'm using that one because if you give an additional payment, you're going to make fewer payments. So I'm using that as the reference. And don't forget to divide the APR by 12 or the PY in case you make semi-annual payments. And then principal is the same function, is CUM, and then it's principal, like that. CUM, PRINC, and then it's the same thing, put all the inputs. Type 1 because, no, type 0. Did I put 1? No, 0. Why? Because it's an ordinary annuity. You're making payments at the end of the month. So it's a regular loan. And in this one, you don't have an option. You have to input 0 or 1. And I put a negative in front of the function to make that. So that will be the total principal between one payment and the last one, which are the same numbers we obtain in the amortization table. So if you have this, now you can help your client. So year 1, how much principal, how much interest. So you will do that between payments, 1 and 12. So those will be the numbers. 20,000, almost 20, and about 6,000 for principal. And then the second year will be what? Between payments 13 and 24. It's about, I think, about 19,005 and 6,000. Okay? So year by year, you can see how much money you have paid. Is it working for all of you? All right. And lastly, I'm going to show you a function. Last class, we calculated the payment, and then we found a way to calculate how much interest you're going to be paying that given month, okay? Which is what? Well, it's the beginning balance times the APR divided by 12. But Excel has a function to do the same thing. So we're going to use that one over here. I don't know. We'll call this one interest per period. And the function, let me just see, the function needs IPNT. Okay, so that will be month 1, and the function is IPMT, which stands for interest payment, and that will be month 1, 2, 3, 4, and so again, follow the syntax. Rate will be the 5% divided by 12. Comma, period, it will be that one. Actual number of payments, present value. And this function does give you the option that you don't have to input the future value, and you don't have to input the type. So in your first month, that's how much money it's applied to interest. And compare that to the last payment, 360. See, only $9. But in your first payment, a lot of interest. Again, why? Because your balance is large in the beginning. It's going to be very small in the end. And hope you practice some of this, because we're going to use those concepts today in a different type of setting. But now you have pretty much a complete real estate calculator. It does payments. It's flexible. You can add extra payments. It gives you all the table, month by month, so you have all of that. On Wednesday, I'm going to release model number 2, go over the instructions with you, and it's going to be something like this, but you're going to have to include property taxes, insurance, PMI, and other functions. So you can make it more interesting. It's going to have to include spin button, so you can change the rate, the number of years, and things like that. And when I remember, I'll let you know, like stories of students. One student, he applied for a World Plaza Development Bank. I think he's in New York. So they give loans to countries in mainly Latin America. So they, their interview, have you done something with loans and things like that? So he sent them this file, and they didn't hire him only because of this, but it was a big help that he had done this. He knows how to do payments. He can make the table, make presentations. So keep this handy. It might help you one day. Or if you apply here locally to a real estate agency, banks, I don't know, something that can help you. Because you can provide a lot of info to your clients, to your managers. So let's save this one. All right, so I'm going to close this file and show you, before we do that, today we're doing, I'm a little ahead in the schedule. So this week we're doing loans, and then the following week on Monday, I'm going to review with you the material. If we have time, I think we'll have time. We can start reviewing on Wednesday because we're ahead of schedule. And then next week is the first exam on Wednesday. Okay? So practice, practice. I told you in the beginning, you can have all your models, your notes, books, whatever you want with you in the exam. But the exam tends to be long because I'm testing also if you know how to do this quickly. Like in the past, like I told you, some students are watching the integrity videos during the exam to remember how to do something. Well, they never finish. And that's when you get a low grade. Okay, so you have to be able to do this quickly. Go through your syllabus and review all the concepts, like all of this in capital letters. All of those are commands. So you're gonna have to use those during the exam. So when you review for the exam, open Excel, do equals kurtosis, and see what it's asking you for. What syntax. I need this, I need that, and try to do your own examples. Repeat the ones we did in class, and that way you can do this very, very quickly, and you can finish the exam on time. Okay. So that will be next week. We have the first exam. Close this. All right. In Blackboard, I have a file, and it's called, I have two of them. You can see this one, list versus by. There's a Word file, and list versus by an Excel file. Open the Excel file. There are different problems, but we'll do this one first. List versus by, the Excel file, and it looks like this one. And we're going to click on that link so we can get some info from there. What is cheaper, leasing a car or buying a car? The payment is smaller, is cheaper, but the overall total payment, lease versus buy, what is cheaper? Usually buying, okay? Because when you lease, you're basically renting a car, and if you lease your cars all your life, you basically have payments all your life. You never get rid of those payments. But we can use Excel and see how this behaves, and you can actually see numbers. Okay? So let's click on, if you click on this link right here, and to do that, you have to go to cell A3, and you see that little hand, and that means you can click on that. And this website, they actually do the calculation for you. And this one actually has three options. You can buy new, you can buy used, or you can do a lease. I'm going to do only buy new and lease. Because when you buy used, it's basically the same thing as new, except the price is going to be cheaper. Okay? And so in this one, it's you're going to be leasing, buying. It's a standard car, just a sedan. And here are the options they give us here. And this one, they did a survey, and so based on that, they came up with these numbers. So leasing, the average mid-size car lease is based on a car that sells for about $25,000. So let's use 25 instead of using 24,775. So that would be what kind of vehicle? I don't know. Like, I don't know. What sells for 25? Brand new. Not the Corolla, but the next one. Maybe the Camry, I'm guessing, or not. Well, that's low for the Camry. I don't know. Basic one, okay? So, it's that type of vehicle. Now, drive-off fees. So basically, today you have to pay this, sort of like a down payment. It's $1,154, and then it results in a monthly payment for 3 years. It's a 3-year lease of $294. So let's use 300 just to make it simple. And I'm going to make the drive-off fee, maybe 1,200. All right. So let's go to the Excel. And lease payment, we said was going to be 300, right? And then drive-off fee. Which is basically taxes and things like that. So 100. Now, how do you choose what is cheaper between leasing and buying? In finance, you learn that you always make your decisions in present value. So we have to estimate all of the cash flows in the two investments, two purchases, and then you discount everything to present value, add up all the present values, and then whatever is cheaper in present value, that is the best option. That's how you always do investment decision. It can be stocks, bonds, leasing, buying a company. It's always done in present value because that's when you're going to be making the decision. So if it's a 3-year lease, how many payments will you be making on this lease? 36, right? 36. So, and we do have a payment that is due today. So I'm going to start with year 0. And how do you make Excel put a column with numbers from 0 to 36? What is the procedure? Fill, yeah, serious. And you want this in a column, step value, monthly, and then stop value, 36. Now, that's the kind of stuff you have to remember during the exam in case you have to do something. So now you have your 36 payments right there. Okay. Now, what are the cash flows? Let's call this cash flow. Even though you're leasing, you're still doing cash flows. It's no different than doing an investment, stocks, bonds, a company. So the cash flow today will be which one? The drive-off fee, which is 1,200. So I'll make that equal to 1,200. And then the lease payment is annuity. So I'll do this. Equals the $300 lease payment. And then you want to copy that function all the way to the bottom. Before we do that, we do what? F4, so we can lock the C9. And then you press enter. And now we can copy this. So it goes all the way to the bottom. Okay. Now, there are ways to do this in simpler steps, but I'm doing this the long way so you can see all the steps and what's happening. And let's find the present value of all the cash flows. And how do you find present values in Excel? You can use the present value formula. You can use the present value function. Okay. So let's use the present value function. So equals present value. And I'm going to let you guys try this one. So again, follow the syntax. It's asking you for all of that. And you're finding the present value of each one of those cash flows. Now for rate, let's use, since when you lease there's no interest rate, you need something to discount the cash flows. So the option is, the alternative is to buy the car with this interest rate. So that would be the APR on the loan, the 2.99. So use that as the APR to find the present value of the cash flows. And give it a try. And I'll do it here. So it'll be that. It's an APR that helps you. And if you did it right, the present value of 1,200 will be 1,200. It's already in present value. And the next one will be 300. I mean, 299.25, the present value of that first payment. Are you getting something different? Wasn't it? I made the comment, the 2.99, it's an APR, meaning what? It's an annual rate, and you're making monthly payments. So what do you have to do to the APR, the G11? You have to divide it by 12. So you can find what is the monthly rate that you can apply to that monthly lease payment. That's a very common mistake, that you forget to convert the APR into a monthly rate, or semi-annual if you're making semi-annual payments. And then A15 will be the one, because how many times are you going to be discounting that first payment? One time. And then I didn't log that one because when I copy the equation, the second lease payment, how many times you want to discount that one? 2, and then 3, 4, etc. Okay. There's no payment, and then minus B15, so I can make the future value negative, so I get a positive number. Now, I'm going to do something here, make an adjustment. I'm going to put comma 1, and then put a 1. And the reason for that is, when you make lease payments, you make them at the beginning of the period. The drive-off fee, it's paid today, and then you start making lease payments 1 month from that period. So it's always at the beginning, so I'll make that 1. It's the same one. I'm going to put the 1. And I'll do it here in a second, but add a comment to the cell that 1, because you make the lease payments at the beginning of the period. So you remember why there's a 1 in there. Okay. Let me do that, and I can put it back. So review, new comment, 1, because lease payments are due at the beginning of the period. So basically we have what? A annuity due is as opposed to an ordinary annuity where the payments are at the end of the period. Okay. So you can have that. And then let's copy this all the way to the bottom. And always look for ways to find out, am I doing this right? And one of them is look at the numbers and see if they make sense. Once you really understand time value of money, it's going to help you. The number, the present value, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Why? Is that right, or it should be going up? But this is not the balance on the, there's no loan, it's no balance. That's just the present value of the future lease payments. So why is the present value of the lease payments, even though it's always the same payment, getting smaller? No, it's not inflation. Why? No, there's no loan in this case. What is the formula for present value? If you don't use the Excel function, present value equals future value over 1 plus r to the n power. So the higher the power, which is this number, 36, the bigger that number, so you're dividing by a bigger number, so it's getting smaller. That's the math. But if you look at time value of money, the more times you discount something, the smaller it is going to be. Okay, so that's why you see the number getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I have a way of showing you that. Okay. Look, I'll put it here on the screen. Don't do it because I want to erase that number. But present value equals future value over 1 plus r raised to the n power. So the numbers in the future, you're raising to a bigger power, you have a bigger number, the present value is going to be smaller. What is the whole concept of time value of money? That money in your hands today has more value than money in the future, because you can start investing that money today. So the further you go into the future, the less value that money has, because you can't invest it. And that's why you see those payments or those present values getting smaller and smaller. That money has less and less and less value. Okay? All right? Okay, so now let's add up all of the let's call this one present value of lease. It will be equal to sum of all of those present values. So in present value, the cost of leasing this vehicle will be $11,517. So let's compare that to buying the car. So I can have this on the same row. I'll do this. I'm going to move this up a little bit, like that. So we can have here present value of buying, of purchase, I guess. And we said it's a $25,000 vehicle, so I'm going to replace that with 25,000. I'm going to go back to the article real quick. And it says here that the average down payment when you buy a new car is $4,000. 4,000 of 25, so that's like what, 15%? So let's make the down payment 15%. And it says right here that the rate is 1.64%. The one I had in the model was 2.99. So 1.6, let's use 2% in between. You're likely to. And the sales, because when you buy the car, you have to pay taxes. In Texas, it's 9.5 on new vehicles. So we have to find the cash flows. So we're going to do the same thing. Find the cash flows and the present value of those cash flows. Okay. If you want, we can do this again. 0, and then home, field, serious, column. You know, to make it comparable, let's use a 3-year loan. So it will be 36 months as well. You can do 5-year loans, but now, what's going to be the cash flow that happens today if you go with buying the vehicle instead of leasing? The down payment, okay? So down payment of what? So it would be the car price, right? But you have to pay taxes. So times 1 plus the 9.5%. So you can find the total price. And then we multiply that by the 15%. So that will be your down payment today. You know, more or less. That's more fees involved. But so let me make that. So that will be your. And then we can actually, well, before I do that, let's find the payment on the loan. And now we have payment. So we're going to use the payment function. Okay? And then we'll find the present value of each of the payments. Give it a try. You know, do equals PMT and find, for me, the payment on that loan, on that vehicle. So it will be 25,000 times 1 plus the tax, so you can find the total price, and then you multiply by the down payment percentage. And that's how much money is due today. Now you can see also why people prefer the leases in some people. Instead of paying $4,000, all you have to pay to drive this vehicle is $1,200. So that's why they make leases attractive to you. All the payments seem to be smaller. And then the payment will be how much? BMT rate. It will be which one? The 2%, right? And it's always going to be that APR. So I'm going to log the number and divide it by 12 to make it a monthly. And then how many payments are in this loan? It's 36 payments. You know, you can have an input cell for that, but in this case, I'll just type the 36. The present value on the loan will be how much? The 25. Well, you know, you're paying the taxes in this case. So 1 plus the tax, and then times what? Well, 1 minus the down payment, because you're financing, in this case it's the financing, right? So you have to multiply by, and I didn't lock the other one, I'll lock 1 minus the down payment, because now this is the financing. And before we can copy, let me lock this one. Okay. Does it make sense why we multiply 1 minus the down payment? You're financing 80, in this case, what? 85% of the vehicle. Now, I copy the equation and that happened, so obviously I have a mistake. What didn't I lock? Number, no, because this is number of payments in the loan. Yeah. That's why I'm using 36. Okay, now it's working. Oh, excuse me. I put that in front of the payment function. The payment function gives you a negative number, so just to make it positive, I put a negative. And now on your own, do the same thing. Find the present value of each one of those payments. So you have to use this one, present value. Those are the numbers. You get those numbers? Can you see them? So now we can do what to find the present value? Sum all of them. So which one is the better option? Based on the numbers I have. Least, right? What do you think I'm missing in the purchase option. There's a cash flow missing, and it goes right here with your last payment. What is the difference between leasing and buying? When you buy the car, it's yours and you keep it. So let's say that since you own the car, let's assume that you sell the car, and for how much will you sell it? Well, based on the numbers, let me go back to the website. It says right here that buying use will be $15,000. So a $25,000 car will be worth about $16,000 after 3 years. So potentially you can sell the car for $16,000. So right here, what I'm going to do is at the end, subtract 16,000, which will make a negative. But we want that so that when you add the numbers, it's going to subtract it from your total payment. So now look what the numbers look like. So what is better, to lease or to purchase? So well, sort of indifferent. It's about the same cost, okay? Except that, after 3 years, you still have to drive. So if you lease, what are you going to have to do here? Get another lease for another 3 years. And what option do you have right here? That you keep it and you finish paying off the car and you don't have any more payments. So if you start adding more lease payments or lease contracts, eventually what's going to happen to these numbers? The buying option will be much better. In the other case, you have to keep leasing. That's when it gets really expensive. And that's why car dealerships, they run models like this, and they see how much money they can make by leasing cars. Consumers, they don't do models like this. So when they tell you the lease option, payment is going to be, 1/2 of the purchase option, and I can drive the vehicle for about 1/4 of buying the vehicle, boom, you go with the lease. But again, that's the value of doing models and seeing this in Excel, that you can visualize this. Okay? The only advantage, people tell me, when you lease, you never have maintenance expenses. It's all covered in the warranty. But in the long run, it's more expensive to lease. All right. If you think about it, what is the most difficult part about doing something like this? Once you know Excel, it is not doing present values. It is not doing payment calculations. What is the most difficult part? It is estimating what? The future cash flows and consider the taxes and the down payments. That's when you have to be really careful in doing your models and your analysis. That you have to think very well about all of the cash flows. If not, garbage in, garbage out. You leave out something, it's going to give you something that's going to look beautiful, but it's meaningless. So always be very careful when you're doing your cash flow estimations. All right. Any questions about this one? No? Okay. Before I do the next lease versus buying, because this is personal, so we're going to do one for the company. And when you do it for the company, you have to consider the tax effects and the tax consequences. But let's call this one lease versus buy car. So we can give it a name. And then I'm going to make a new one, and I'm going to call this one perpetuity. So I'm going to show you how to do perpetuities in Excel. What is a perpetuity in Excel? Oh, not in Excel, in finance. So. And is the same cash flow or is it different? So it's an annuity that goes on forever. So you have the same payment that it goes on forever. That's what we call them perpetuities. There are few examples of perpetuities. The Bank of England, the Central Bank of England has a perpetuity. I don't know when they issue that bond, but it goes on forever. It never expires. So all you can do is, if you buy that, at some point you have to sell it. You're gonna die, and this is gonna go on forever. It's a perpetuity. Other than that one, I don't know one. When can you use them in your analysis? If you join a gym and you want to find the present value of all of those monthly payments, how long are you going to be a member? 1 year, 2, 3, 4? Unless you're going to be living there for a couple years because of your job. But if you plan to live there basically forever, then you can do that on a perpetuity basis. So how long is a perpetuity? It's forever. But since we can't do forever in Excel, let's go really far into the future. And so I'm going to go from 0, and I'm going to use that field command, series, in a column. Let's go all the way to 10,000. And you can see that, yeah, there's enough space for, I think Excel goes to 30,000. Let me see. Oh no, this one goes to 1,048,000. Wow. When I used a spreadsheet the first time, they only went to like 3,000, I think. It's the computer memory. Okay. Now, let's pick a cash flow for the perpetuity. It can be any number in this case. So it is, let's use 100. And then copy that all the way to the bottom. So imagine for 10,000 years, you will receive $100 every year. That's forever, right? So how much will you pay for this perpetuity? Somebody offers you for the next 10,000 years, I'll make you an annual payment of $100. You can inherit this to your families. How much will you pay? What is the most you will pay for this? We have to find the present value of all of those cash flows. Now, if you recall, there's an equation for perpetuities. And the present value, I'll put it right here, present value of a perpetuity equals the payment over the discount rate. It's a very simple formula. Let's use a simple rate, 10%. So what is the present value of this perpetuity? It will be equal to, what is the payment in the perpetuity? 100, you can pick any of them, over 10%, and that equals $1,000. So the most you will pay for this perpetuity, if you want to make 10% on your money, it will be $1,000. Okay? But since we have Excel, we can actually prove that formula. So I want you guys to find the present value of that first cash flow. And do the same thing, present value. We should not include 0. Because if you have the perpetuity today, the payment's beginning 1 year from today. So I'm going to erase that one right there. And if I add up all of those present values, why is this? something didn't like here. Let me see. At some point, he didn't like raising to the exponent. I think that's why. Let me. After that point, Excel can't do the calculations. I'm going to erase those. You can only go to 7,422 before it gives you an error. So equals sum of all of that, and equals how much? I can have decimals. So if you use the equation payment over R, what is the present value of the annuity or perpetuity? $1,000. If you discount all of them and then you combine them, add them all up, you still get 1,000. Okay, that's why you can use that simple formula. And there's math to develop that equation, but and look what is happening to the present value of the same cash flow as you go on in time. You know, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually it's worth nothing. You know? Think about this. Somebody tells you, how much will you give me today in exchange for $100 in 138 years? And your answer will be, I'll give you nothing, because the money, you know, by then the money will have no value whatsoever at 10%. Now, 100 years later, you will be willing to give up today 1 penny in exchange for $100 in 100 years at 10%. It will be the same thing. It will be the equivalent. So that's perpetuities. All right. Okay, we're going to be working with this one, lease versus buy. It's a Word document. And there's an error in this one. It's not 40 bucks the tax rate. It is 40%. It's a typo. And it's difficult to be going back and forth, especially you have the small screen. So I made copies of that so you can see where this is all coming from. Let me give you a copy. Oh. Mm-hmm. 5. Uh-huh. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Okay. So same thing, lease versus buy. So let's go back to the Excel. And let's make a new one. And call this one lease versus buy. And this will be for equipment in a company. It can also be a car, but it's different when a company versus people buy and lease. When you do the analysis, there are tax consequences. So we'll be doing that today. And I'm going to go back to the Excel very quickly. I mean the Word document. and you can read it in your handout. So companies trying to decide whether to lease machine for 5 years and pay the residual purchase cost to buy the machine in the last year of the lease. Just like the vehicle, when you finish the lease, you have to take it back. And then they'll give you an option. You want to lease a new vehicle or you want to purchase the vehicle you have been leasing. So in this case, the company will be buying the equipment. And the only reason for doing the lease is you get a smaller payment today. And maybe the company needs the equipment and they don't have the money to buy the equipment, so they go with the lease option. The annual lease payments will be $4,100, and the payments are made at the beginning of every year. Residual purchase cost will be $12,600 to be paid at the beginning of the 5th year. The lease payments are standard business expenses. Make sure you know that, highlight that, underline it, I don't know. Lease payments are the standard business expenses. And that means that you can use it as an expense, so you can reduce your tax bill, okay? When you buy a vehicle, when you lease a vehicle, you can deduce that from your taxes, personal taxes. Companies can, okay? The option is that the company can go to the bank and get a loan for $45,700. Annual loan payments will be made for 5 years at 6%. The machine will be fully depreciated in a straight line over 5 years. The loan payment, and again, this is important, loan payment and depreciation provide tax shields against the corporate tax rate of 40%. So because it's a company, they can also reduce the tax bill with the depreciation expense and the interest expense. The appropriate discount rate, because we do this in present value, again, the analysis. So the discount rate is the after-tax cost of debt. And very important is right here, after tax. That's a, because all of that's going to give you clues when you do your cash flows. So should the company buy or should the company lease the equipment? Okay. So let's begin the analysis. And we're going to do the lease option first. It's simpler. I'm going to begin in C4. So you can be in the same one. C4. And it will be machine lease payment. And it was 4,100. You can read it in your handout. Other inputs we need, loan rate is 6%. Number of payments, 5. Now, companies don't do annual payments on their loans or annual lease payments. They're monthly, just like we people do. But if I do monthly, 5 years, I need 60 columns, 60 rows. So we'll keep it at 5, just to keep everything condensed, and you can see what's going on here. The rate in this company is 40%. Have you seen that in all these books, finance books? They always use 40% for the tax rate of companies. Why 40 and not another number? What is the highest tax rate for companies in the U.S.? It's not 40. It's how much? It's 35%. So the other 5 points, those are state taxes. So typically, a company will pay 35 plus 5 points in state taxes. And that's why we use 40. Now, some states might be 4 and 6, but 5 is a good number. In Texas, that tax is called franchise tax. It's not because you have a franchise. I don't know why, but it's called franchise tax. So let's do the option of a lease right here. And then we'll do this for how many payments? It said 5 annual lease payments. So let's do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it'll be the same thing for the loan payments. So we have to calculate the after-tax lease payment. Why after-tax? It's a company, so they can write it off or deduce this from the taxes. So, and they happen at the beginning. So we're going to begin today, year 0. How do you find the after-tax lease payment? What will be the equation? What will be the equation? No. How do you find the after-tax lease payment? How do you find after-tax payments? $41 times what? 1 minus. Like that. And it's going to be the same every year. So let me go and log those. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 payments. Okay? Be really careful not to go to year number 5. You only have 5 payments, but they happen at the beginning. And that's why the last payment you see it's on year 4. If you count, you have 5 payments on the screen. Okay? And then because the company's leasing the equipment, there is going to be a residual cost that the company has to pay. And that equals, again, in the little handout I gave you, $12,600. Okay? Let's do something just so you know which ones are inputs and which ones are outputs. I'm going to make the inputs a different color. I don't know, something like that. So that means, when you're working in the exam, working on the homework, you remember orange, that's an input. Everything else is a calculation. Okay? Now, how is the company going to pay for that? That will be, in 5 years, they're going to have to find out whether they have the cash, or they will be using a loan, or they're going to renew the lease. But all we know today is that the number is right there. Okay? So after tax cash flows will be equal to that plus that one. And then we can copy the equation. And in the past, students ask me, do you have to do that? 2460 plus the empty cell? No, you can do just equal to 2460. But then when you copy your equation, what's going to happen when you get to the last one? It's not going to fit. So you're going to have different equations. And so that's why I'm doing that, just to be consistent. Okay? So now I'm going to be asking you to find the present value of those 5 cash flows. So give it a try. Find the present value of each one. Same way we did the lease versus buy for the car. Same way we did for the perpetuity. Just find the present value of each one of those cash flows. Equals present value. And then continue. Not going to have time to do the purchase option, just this. Let me point this out so I can do it with you. In your handouts, if you read this right here, the appropriate discount rate for both lease and purchase is the after-tax cost of debt, because companies, when they have debt, they can deduce the interest payment. So we always do this in after-tax cost of debt. And that means in the Excel, when you're finding present values, you should have done something similar to this. Equals present value. It's asking me for the rate. So you click on the 6%. But then how do you find the after-tax cost of debt? You have to multiply that by 1 minus T. That's how you find the after-tax cost of debt. For those of you taking corporate finance right now, we did WACC analysis, and in the WACC equation, we did WD, RD times 1 minus T. So it's the same thing here, no different. Comma, you're gonna discount this how many times? 0. So I click on the 0. It's already in present value. No payment. And then the future value is that number, the after-tax cash flow. And then you can close the parenthesis. Copy this. So what is the present value of the lease in this case? It will be the sum of all the present values. I think I had a mistake. Something didn't work. Because this one is not, oh, see. Obviously, that's, I forgot to do lock some of the cells. So which ones do I have to lock? The D5, you want to lock that one. The 7, and that's it, right? There you go. So that's the present value of the lease.